the primary skill set is the attitude that you have, your way with people. It's amazing how many salespeople, when they greet a potential customer, they don't smile. They don't make the potential customer feel welcome. And to me, it's the basics. It's a smile. It's a handshake. It's the welcoming feeling. It's the personality of what can I do to make your day or life better.
I'm Rebecca White, and today's guest is Jason Kuhn. Born and raised in Allentown, Pennsylvania, today Jason is a successful entrepreneur who splits his time between Tampa and Chicago. A serial entrepreneur, Jason loves the deal, and he's certainly an expert in this space, having transacted over 50 deals in ventures in automotive retailing, insurance, technology, software, and real estate development. But he's not only an excellent negotiator, he's a seasoned business operator who knows how to extract value from both high-performing companies as well as distressed organizations. Over the years, his companies have won awards of distinction for achieving outstanding customer satisfaction as well as operational excellence. Born and raised in Allentown, Pennsylvania, Jason holds degrees in business administration, law, and has a specialization in tax law. Today, we talk about how he transitioned from his career as an M&A tax consultant for KPMG in their New York City headquarters to serial entrepreneur, investor, and board member for a number of startups and not-for-profit organizations. We also dig into industry disruption and discuss ways astute entrepreneurs can take advantage of these volatile business environments. I hope you enjoy this episode. Morning, Jason. Thanks for being with us on the Infactor today.
Good morning. Pleasure. Thank you so much for asking me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you. You're a very successful Tampa Bay entrepreneur that I've gotten to know through our mutual board work with Embark Collective, which is a wonderful group that really helps promote technology entrepreneurship here. And I've just been really impressed. You've been in to talk to our students some, and that's really been fun for them and for me. And so I'm just excited to have you on the podcast today and learn more about your background and your entrepreneurial journey.
Well, perfect. Let's go.
All right. So tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up? Did you always want to be an entrepreneur? Did this start like with a lemonade stand when you were a little boy?
So I actually grew up the oldest of three boys in the northeastern part of Pennsylvania. And my father was an accountant by training, but really was an entrepreneur in his heart. He had a great ability to analyze and distill a lot of information simultaneously from a financial standpoint, and bought and sold several small businesses during his lifetime. But the one thing he lacked is he really did not have a high risk tolerance, which I think prevented him from going further within the entrepreneurial landscape that he would have enjoyed. My brothers and I have sort of a wide range of risk tolerances among us. I think within our family, I'm not even the most successful entrepreneur. My middle brother, Eric, founded two. He's now on to his second very, very successful business. He took his first company public. He must have only been 28 or 29 years old. And so, and this was nothing surprising to any of us. It was, certainly work was encouraged growing up. I had a paper route when I was 12. My brothers and I were selling baseball cards when we were 14, 15, 16 years old. And I actually started a tennis camp, I think during my college years. So wanting to be, being curious about business was something that I always had. It was never really about how can I make a dollar or two, although that was always good. But the money was usually secondary. It was just out of a curiosity, I think, that that the entrepreneurial fire in me was born.
That you mentioned curiosity. Sir Richard Branson, I think, says that's the one thing that differentiates entrepreneurs from everybody else. And of course, he's been a role model entrepreneur in many ways. Speaking of role models, you mentioned your father, because I had a role model in my mother who was also an entrepreneur. And you talk about this mindset. And so are there one or two lessons maybe? You mentioned that risk tolerance wasn't part of your father's DNA necessarily, but that there were other attributes. Are there one or two that stand out for you that you remember, lessons that you and your brothers got that led to this entrepreneurial success that you've had?
Yes, and I think a lot of the lessons transfer into life in general. For example, I think to be successful in business in general, you have to be able to make decisions with less than a complete data set. Most people, before they make a big decision, want to gather all the information and take a lot of time to do that. And you just don't have the time in business and sometimes in life to do that. And so it's learning to gather whatever the most important knowledge is and then make a judgment call and go and live with the consequences and move on from that. And so I think that was very, very important. I think also, we talk a lot about failure in the entrepreneurial community, and people have different viewpoints on failure. But I think my perspective is it's okay to fail. It's great to fail. I certainly failed a lot of times, but you want to fail small. You don't want to fail big. And I think that, there's sort of this concept of convexity around failing. And if you can fail small 1,000 times and then succeed really big one time, you're doing okay. So I think that those were some of the things that I picked up that I certainly use both in business and in life in general.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful one. And I love the way that you describe it, fail small. Sometimes we talk about failing early in the process, so you don't have quite as much invested. And I think it's a similar concept. But, learning, sort of being given permission in a way at a young age to make a mistake, I think can be really powerful because, this need for perfectionism can be painful and get in the way, I think, a lot of times. So that's a really powerful one. I want to revisit that a little bit in a few minutes, but let's talk a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey. So Kuhn Automotive, of course, has been a big success for you, but I know there are other entrepreneurial efforts along the way and things that you're doing now. Let's talk about how did you get from, I know you're a lawyer and you also have a background in tax, which I actually want to ask you a few questions about as well.
Sure.
But let's talk about your path. How did you get to Kuhn Automotive?
Yeah, it was a journey like most people's where you don't really plan it out. I was in law school, getting my master's in tax law at the time, and I met the woman who was to become my first wife, and her family was in the car business down in South Florida, and I think it was right after we got engaged, she decided she really wanted to move closer to home. And so we ended up moving to Miami, and her family, they offered me the opportunity to come work for them and learn the business. And so I transitioned from in essence doing corporate mergers and acquisition consulting to selling cars. And it was tough. There were long days. I was selling in a part of Miami that was predominantly Spanish speaking. And so there were a lot of roadblocks where I remember coming home at the end of the day being miserable. There were just times I thought I had made a terrible mistake. And little did I know that it was that experience, grinding it out, learning what salespeople had to go through day in and day out, that really made me a much better owner years later. And so I did that for a few years and went through a management training program. And then I think I made the decision that I really wanted to work for myself. I think that I had the self-awareness that I am a terrible employee. I think that I always have been. And that I wanted to be the one to make or break my destiny. And so we left Miami and I bought a very small rundown car dealership in Gainesville, Florida, which sounds luxurious because it was Porsche, BMW, Volkswagen, but it was anything but. It was sort of like a dirt lot. Porsche, in fact, came in and they said on my first day, we really want to close the Porsche point down. And I begged them not to. And they said, fine, but we're only going to give you one car a month. And it was hard. I remember I couldn't pay myself for the first 3 or 6 months, and I was working 24/7. We only had 18 or 20 employees, but I stuck it out. I ended up finding creative ways to buy cars. And after a year or 18 months, I had built it up into a thriving business to where, I don't know, 2 years after I bought it, my phone rang and I got an offer for something like 20 times what I had paid to sell it. And so the journey began. And that was really the start of my love and passion, more so for the deal than for the actual car business. I like cars, but I'm not what you would call a car enthusiast. Mm-hmm. But I love the deal and worked very, very hard to learn the landscape of who owned car dealerships in the state of Florida, what my competition was doing. We ended up moving to Tampa, and I bought a Ford dealership in Newport Richey at the time. And I just kept growing. And as I would buy one, fix one up, and sell it, I would continue to push all the chips back into the center. I never took $1 off the table for the first 15 years. Maybe that was stupid. Maybe that was naive. But I had the confidence in myself that I could make whatever I was doing successful as long as I controlled my own path.
And you, as you pointed out, you loved the deal. So it wasn't time for you to cash out and take a bunch of money off the table and hang out in Cancun or something, right? Even though you could have maybe.
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing. So there's many different entrepreneurial paths. So most people, when they think of an entrepreneur, they think of somebody who's inventing or creating something or providing a new service. But I didn't do that. So in fact, it's sort of the opposite. Car dealers are, so if you think about this model, we're all given the same product. We have to buy it for the same amount. We are really subject to a marketing campaign that we can't control. And then we're told to go and build a very, very expensive building on Main and Main that you're going to have a lot of fixed costs that are associated with it. And then it's sort of like good luck. And if you sort of drew this up, nobody would offer to go in and spend all of their time doing this. But that's what car dealers in general go through. And I think it's what makes car dealers in general very, very, very successful at what they do, because you just have the experience to differentiate yourself. And when the only thing you can do to gain or lose a sale is to provide a better experience than your competitor, it forces you to be creative. It forces you to be scrappy. It forces you to think outside the box. And all of the wide-ranging skill sets that I think are important for entrepreneurs to have.
There is so much insight in that. And, our listeners, a lot of our listeners are students or people who would like to be entrepreneurs. There's so much in what you just said there, because I've interviewed hundreds, thousands, actually, of entrepreneurs over the years. I've been an entrepreneur myself. And, it's so true that those times, those challenges are the things that really help us build our unique offerings, or they require us to be creative, as you pointed out. And that's where we get our uniqueness. That's where we get our special sauce, so to speak.
Right.
Nothing about you, but car dealers and car dealerships have a really bad reputation among people. Most people would rather do most anything than have to go negotiate.
We hear root canal, but yes.
Yeah, I didn't want to say that one. But what do you think has been? I mean, what's been the problem in the industry at large? Because obviously you had to start thinking about that pretty deeply, because you were there because you wanted to create a successful business and be better than everybody else that you were competing against.
Yeah. Well, for a long time the model has been broken, and let's face it, the car dealer as a middle man, I'm going to use a gender pronoun, but it is a flawed concept. You should, in today's day and age, you should be able to take your phone, click, 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 have a car show up, sign on the iPad, and you're done. And look, to be fair, there are certain startups that have begun to do that, but there are just a lot of reasons why the distribution model is broken. Now, the car manufacturers have an awful lot of money invested in this model. The car dealers have more money invested. But it's sort of the reason why back in 2015 or 16, I decided to start to get out of the business and to sell some of my dealerships, because I look down the pipeline, and I'm not saying that dealerships as a model are going to go away entirely, but they are going to continue to change. I don't think for the better. And I wanted to, at that time I still hadn't taken any real money off of the table, and it was a good time for me to do that and to diversify into other ventures that I thought had more tailwinds behind them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that was about the time. I mean, Carvana, of course, has had a lot of success. One of my former guests was the founder of Calypso, who Carvana bought to become who they are. And, we had lots of conversations about that, too. But, the one big challenge I see in there is, I agree with you. I mean, banking, for example. Who would have thought many years ago that banking could be, could be pretty much all online? I mean, at one time we all felt like we needed to talk to our banker and know them personally and that sort of thing. But, I was on a bank board, and we weren't building bank branches for sure, because of many of the things you're talking about. But how do you get around the need or the desire to try out a car? Do you have a showroom maybe that dealers provide?
So I think a middle ground would be so for example, if you take a franchise like Toyota, I think there are 9 Toyota dealerships within the Tampa Bay market, which is crazy. So I think if you had maybe 3 industrial park lots full of new Toyotas where you could go and test drive the car, they could bring it to you, and then maybe 20 or 25 service centers, that would be a lot more convenient model than just 8 or 9 dealerships. It would be a better model for the dealer, a better model for the manufacturer, better for the consumer. And look, there are a lot of things there are some things today in society that are business concepts that are better for the consumer that the business owners have yet to figure out how to make money on. Uber being one, right? Yeah. And so it's great for consumers. They still can't figure out a way to monetize that profitably. And so I think, and service is another part. You're always going to have to bring your car in or have it brought in for you. Yes, some you'll be able to do some updates via chip, where your car doesn't have to come in. But things will break. And so, again, the repair shops won't go away as a concept. But just the entire model of high fixed costs continuing to get, higher. And I think the last 5 or 7 years, we've been existing in a very, very low interest rate environment. A lot of car dealers have spent an awful lot of money either building new dealerships or making new acquisitions. And I think that could come home to roost should rates really, really climb. Even if they climb to 4 or 5%, it's not the nominal rate. It's the fact the interest expense will be 3 or 4 or 500 times or 5x what the original rate was. So, the business is very cyclical. There are ups, there are downs. But for me, it was a good time to try some other things.
Sure. Well, I think it's fascinating. And you grew this to what size? I mean, how many dealerships did you have at your largest?
I think I ended up buying 12, 13, or 14 franchises over 20-ish years. We never had all of those simultaneously. Volkswagen was the franchise that I had the most of. I think I had 4 Volkswagen dealerships at one point. But I owned Porsche, Ford, Acura, Honda, and the business model is exactly the same. It's the cars are different, the customers might be different, but the dealership business is exactly the same, whether you're selling a Ford or a Porsche.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about, teams and people and some of your philosophy and what you learned, because you came from a law background. I'm married to a lawyer, so I know what that can be like. What was your strategy around people, and what were some of the creative things that you did as a leader in this very challenging industry, quite honestly, which I think translates to a lot of industries today, because I think there's a lot of industries in transition.
No question, Rebecca. I think that that was one of the toughest transitions for me coming out of the environment I was in into the car business. The car business, like a lot of businesses, has a very wide range of jobs and pay scales. And, we have employees that make $12 an hour, and we have employees that make, they could make $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year. And the recruiting, the training, the motivating, the compensating of everybody under one roof is a very difficult. It was difficult 20 years ago. It's exponentially more difficult today. I distinctly remember that at the beginning of my career, one of my lot porters didn't show up for a day, and I went to his supervisor and I said, "You need to get rid of him. He just didn't call in. He just didn't show up." And I was told very early on that if that was my reason for terminating somebody in the car business, then I was going to be looking for people for a very, very long time, because, certain employees just, with certain jobs just would decide they don't want to come into work. And so it was difficult to learn how to differentiate ourselves by being the type of company that we wanted to be, which really started with formulating the way that we wanted people to feel. Look, the alarm clock goes off in the morning, and you have to like in life what you're doing. Life is short. If you do not like what you're doing, day in and day out, and week in and week out, and year in and year out, certainly, then go and do something else. So I very much believed that when the alarm clock went off in the morning, I want all of my employees to feel good about where they're going to work, feel good about the company that is taking care of them, feel good about the moral character of the owners, that not only we were going to have the money to pay them, but that we believed in treating everybody fairly, giving everybody the opportunities they deserved. From a very early time period on, we had a very diverse workplace, and I was very proud of that. We had a higher percentage of females in the business than most car dealerships, and I loved that and continue to want to build on that today. And so it was certainly a learning curve for me, and we made a lot of mistakes, but and like you referred to, it's gotten even more challenging today, for sure.
Yeah, I know talent acquisition right now is at an all-time challenge. Probably as long as I've been working, it's one of the most challenging times, because I think a lot of, there have been the Great Resignation, of course, and a lot of things that have happened post-pandemic or during and post. But I know in the car dealership, because a few years ago I did some consulting work for a dealership here, and one of their biggest challenges was getting talent in the maintenance side and the repair side, because it had the industry had changed so much, and so many of their employees were older, and it was hard to attract young people to this industry. And I know they were looking at how to build a pipeline. That was one of their biggest challenges to the maintenance and mechanic side. I'm on the board of MarineMax, and we have the same thing with boat mechanics. It's not a fun job a lot of times, even though it's a very highly skilled and well-paying job.
It's a very well-paying job, and it's something, again, from an ethos of the business. You have to. It's a chicken and the egg thing. You have to put the money out first for training and to buy tools and to teach these young adults a skill set that can provide very, very well down the line for themselves and their loved ones. But you can't just wave a magic wand and find people that are already skilled today to come in. There just aren't enough highly skilled mechanics in the workforce, and so you have to invest the money to create that pipeline. And a lot of business owners don't want to put the dollars in first. They want you to show them how they're going to get the dollars out. And so that's a mindset as well. And it's certainly a risk approach you have to take because there is risk associated with that. Employees may not work out, or they may leave right after you train them, or for a whole host of reasons, you may not get the return on your investment, but there is no other way, I think, today.
Yeah. And another, so besides people, another really, I would think, very important part of your industry and most industries is the sales side. And how important is it for, let's say, a student who wants to be, own their own business someday to gain some sales skills? Would that be an important thing for them to spend a little time on? So
sales is so funny. So because I used to teach sales training in my stores for a few years, and it's very interesting how most people's perception about sales is that the most important thing is learning intricate details about the product you are selling. And while that is important, the primary skill set is the attitude that you have, your way with people. It's amazing how many salespeople, when they greet a potential customer, they don't smile. They don't make the potential customer feel welcome. And to me, it's the basics. It's a smile. It's a handshake. It's the welcoming feeling. It's the personality of what can I do to make your day or life better. If a potential salesperson has those skills and that's it, I can teach everything else. If you don't have that demeanor and personality and desire to please people, then it doesn't matter whether you memorize the horsepower on every single different car we sell, you are never going to be successful.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So it's really knowing more figuring out more about that customer, right? Putting your attention on the customer than on the product you're selling. You have to know the product. There's no doubt about that.
You have to know about whatever it is that you sell. And, to answer your other part of the other part of your question, a sales background is sort of like my law background. So while directly we weren't doing anything where I was practicing law, but I used it every day. And I used that legal training and the reasoning skills and the analytical skills every single day, and I continue to use it. And it's the same thing in sales. I use my sales skills every single day. And so while it doesn't matter if you stay in the sales arena, I think that a sales background is a wonderful skill set to obtain for anybody going out in the business trajectory today.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and it's something I learned early on, and it wasn't how I wanted to spend my entire career.
Right.
But when it goes back to I'm helping somebody, then it felt good and it feels good. So I think that kind of sales attitude. So I just have to ask you about tax, because I don't get the chance. Not many of my guests have that kind of expertise, but man, tax is so important to know, for an entrepreneur, because it can get you in big trouble if you're ignorant in many ways about it. So what would be, one or two things that you would tell every aspiring entrepreneur or every, young entrepreneur out there who might be early in their building a company? What do they need to know about tax, and how do they make sure they keep themselves, in good standing, so to speak, on a tax perspective?
Well, so if I can back up before we discuss tax, you mentioned one or two things. So the two things I tell my kids all the time is that, the two most important skills you can graduate school and go into the workforce with. Number one, the ability to communicate well. The ability to write well, the ability to speak well, the ability to let the world know what it is you want and need, and communicate with other people in a very effective manner. So that's extremely important no matter what you end up doing in life. And I think the second one for business, more specifically for business, is the ability to read balance sheets. It's amazing to me how many entrepreneurs in the world today cannot read financial statements, not an income statement, balance sheet. And if you have to rely on somebody else in your company or in your life to tell you what your cash position is or is not, that's a very weak position to be in. And so while you don't have to take 5 accounting classes, I really recommend that everybody be able to have the skill set to at least read simple statements to where they don't have to rely on third parties to give them the basic financial information that they need.
Yeah.
On the tax side specifically, again, we employ a host, we use tax attorneys, of course, on all of our transactions, but the taxes in general affect every single transaction, from, even sales tax, figuring out whether we need to collect it or not collect it. We talk about real estate taxes when we go and we buy a property, whether, what we think that real estate tax environment is. And then, of course, on the income tax side, it directs how we form a new company. So whether we set it up as a partnership, as an S Corp, as a C Corp, as a limited liability company, all of those things you can't know unless you know the basic tax structure of how the tax code is written, and then know when to get advice. I think people, they think, well, I can wait until I'm making money or until I'm making a lot of money to get some advice. And then sometimes undoing things is costlier than getting that advice at the beginning and doing it right at the outset.
Yeah, I was just talking with Jermaine, who does all of our wonderful media work, and learning about depreciation when you're buying a lot of equipment too, and a savings that can be to understand the tax structure opportunities. And if you don't, you might be paying a lot more money than you have to. Or so I think there's a lot to that. I love the way you put it. It really affects you in everything you do. So you've got to.
It affects you in everything you do. And again, these are sort of, I go back to my father used to talk to us incessantly about a whole bunch of different things. And I try to emulate that in talking to our 4 kids. And I really believe today, everybody seems to want to be an entrepreneur and start their own business. And that's great. I am all for it. But what I worry about is I worry that some of the young people don't understand some of the basics that are going to be involved, such as, to make an outsized return, you're going to have to take some big risks. And so in life as well. And so I think that you have to look inside and say, are you a person that can put it on the line? Are you somebody that if it fails will have the ability to get up off the floor? Again, another life lesson, not just in business, but things happen in life that we are not prepared to deal with. So are you going to be somebody that can mourn that and get past it? Or are you somebody who is just going to be completely spun around and not able to pick themselves, up? And so, and then I think the third part is, look, everybody that I talk to, every kid in a business school class, they all want to make $1 zillion. And that's fine as well. But I think then if you do, you have to understand there's going to be very little balance in your life for a long time. It's just going to be about a grind. It's going to be about putting the hours in, and this whole concept of, work-life balance and taking time to do other things. It's for the very top 1% or 1% of 1%, there is no balance, and there are trade-offs. And so I think that that's something that is not well spoken about today and understood.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. At the end of the day, there's a whole lot of hard work behind all of those success stories, and we tend to see and there's a lot of sleepless nights. And like you said, maybe you are the kind of person that can do this, but do you want it? It's a life choice, really, and
it's a life choice. And there are a lot of people I know of that live on modest incomes and are extremely happy, and they live great lives. And look, money is not the solution to life. It can make certain parts of life better. It can give you some freedom. It can provide you with certain things. But after that point, it's just the way that our society keeps score. But it's certainly not the end all be all. And there are trade-offs for sure.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I just heard a gentleman talking about a new book he'd written about, finding happiness later in life. And he was talking about overhearing somebody 80 years old on the plane talking about they might as well be dead. Nobody cared anymore, blah, blah, blah. And he's a psychologist. So, he turned around and looked when he got off. And it was actually, he didn't say who it was, but he said it's a very well-known, highly successful people that everybody practically in the world knows. And this person at 80 was feeling like their life didn't matter because he was pointing out that purpose is what really, I think what people really love about the entrepreneurs that I talk to, what they love, where their eyes light up is when they talk about the sense of purpose they got from what they were doing. And money's great, but it tends to, the investors have that they want they're more the capitalists involved, and we have to understand that as entrepreneurs. But I think most entrepreneurs are driven and willing to have those sleepless nights because there's something they love and a sense of purpose in it.
No question. And I think most entrepreneurs go out on their own, and what instead of do things collaboratively from the outset. And I think that one of the suggestions that I have, because I built my business by myself, and it is lonely. You're on an island, you're up all night thinking of, is this good? Is this bad? What do I tell this employee? Do I give, a raise, or do I not? And most people don't have sounding boards. And I really suggest, there's the whole mentor-mentee concept, which is good, but you also need peer interaction. You need other people going through what you're going through simultaneously to bounce things off of, to talk with about ideas. I'll tell you that one of the best things in my life is that I'm involved in some organizations like Young Presidents, where we have a small group of 7 people. So I'm the oldest. Most of them are youngish, and they're highly successful. But we spend 95% of our time talking about failures and talking about the things that we're screwing up and giving each other advice and help. And, we invented something called the $10,000, guarantee, where these are people where if any of us called each other at 2 a.m. and said, I need to borrow $5,000 or $10,000, no questions asked, no promise to give it back, would you do it? And, all of us agreed that we are going to do that for each other. And I just don't think people have enough of those people in their lives. Yeah. Some people, their parents wouldn't even do that, or their brothers and sisters. And so entrepreneurs in general need a peer group. They need people around them. They need community. And I think that gives fulfillment along with the business that they are growing.
Yeah, that I almost got cold chills from that. What a great story, and what a great testament to friendship and support. And we all need that. Absolutely, I love that. And not, partners are not always the solution either, because those can be problematic.
Partners are. So I had 2 partners in my life. Neither one ended well, and I'll take half the blame on both of those. But one of the reasons partnerships don't work is because, Rebecca, we don't ask the hard questions going in. Even in marriages, right? Like some marriages don't work because we refuse to have the hard conversations. And so when do we have them? 5 or 10 years later, when we're like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have known, that you think like this, or you value this, or don't.
Yeah.
And I just think, again, like we just have to force ourselves to if you're going to partner with somebody, find out how they value money, find out how they value geography, find out how they want to allocate time to the business, away from it, early on and up front, because it's very important.
That's really good advice. We're all in love in the beginning, right? So you've led me into a really question I like to ask all my guests, and that's about failure. We've mentioned it several times, and it sounds like you've had a few along the way. Would you have a story or anything you would share about how you think about failure and how you deal with failure, how you personally get through that?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I have never really been bothered by failing. I've failed so many times in business and tried things that didn't work, cost me time, cost me money, cost me employees, cost me everything. But I did things, again, we talked about measured failure at the beginning. And for me, I think that if I'm going to take a risk on something that might fail, it's a measured risk to say, okay, is this proportionate? Am I doing something to where if I succeed, the outcome will be great than the loss that I will have in case it doesn't work? And so it's a lot of that analysis. And so while I've had so many things blow up and fail, from business decisions to investing decisions to partnerships, number one, I try not to make the same bad decision twice, which I think is key. Number two, I try to learn from what it is as to why something went wrong. And then number three, as I said, I try to make sure that if I'm going in, the upside is a lot more than the downside. And so while I don't have one specific dramatic burnout, coming in today to do this, I heard a story about the difference between people who spend their lives in business trying to make something 5 or 10 or 20% better versus those people that say, we're just going to start again and we're going to try to make it 1,000% better. And the Elon Musks of the world and the Steve Jobs of the world are people who blow things up that most people would just tweak a little bit. And I think that's what differentiates real innovation from evolution, maybe. And that's, again, goes back to my point where if you want outside rewards, you have to take the huge risks.
And the bigger the vision, right? The bigger the failures probably are going to be along
Absolutely.
the way.
That's right.
But it's all a choice, and
That's
that
right.
I think we've heard that in your message. This has been so great. So tell me what you're doing these days, Jason. You know, you're I think down to one dealership. You told me, and I know you're on the Embark board with me, and I know you're doing a lot of other things. So what's in store for Jason now?
Well, I think I've reached the phase of my life where it's really two-pronged. Number one, it's more experiential. All projects that I do now, I want to be collaborative with other people and have the experience of collaborating and sharing ideas and building something together within a community of people. And then the other thing is to give back. I really am spending more time coaching, mentoring, doing nonprofit work. I do a lot with pancreatic cancer and raise funds and awareness and help people going through that dreadful disease and give back to the Tampa community. I'm very, very fortunate for the successes that I've had. Some of it was luck. I'd like to think some of it was some of the hours that I put in. But it's really time in my life to give back to the greater community, to my children, to my friends. And that's what really gives me pleasure today.
You know, it's interesting because I've been thinking a lot about, you know, similarities among all the stories that I'm collecting. And I've come up with love, leadership, and legacy. And I see that in your story. You managed to find something you love. You loved the deal and worked with people that you enjoy. And you stepped up as a leader in your industry, made changes, had an impact, and now you're leaving a legacy. So congratulations on all that. And it's been a delight to talk to you today. And I'm excited to share your story with all of our listeners. One thing I always do at the end is ask, and you've given us so many good pieces of advice, but if there was one piece of advice that you would have given, you know, yourself before you started this, or that you would give to one of our aspiring entrepreneurs, one thing that they can take away, and again, there have been so many already, but what would that be?
I think that the most important thing is to find something that you're really good at and make yourself better at it. I think that is, and whether that's starting a business or starting, you know, a dental practice or whatever it is, strive to become the best in what you can be. And I think that so many things flow from that. And by the way, most of my ideas, Rebecca, I steal from other people because I hear such great ideas. And so while I can't take credit for a lot of things, I'm a big believer that happiness and joy come from being really good at something, the community that gives you, the self-confidence that it gives you, the self-worth, all of that, aside from even the financial trappings, really, really help to build a fundamentally good life. And so that's probably the one piece of advice if I had to drill it down.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And if we could all aspire to a good life, it's a great aspiration. Thank you, Jason. If our listeners would like to find out more about Kuhn Automotive or you, how could they do that? Are you on any social media, or is there any Anything you want to share about the business?
You can contact me. You can get in touch with me at the dealership, Kuhn Volkswagen on Kennedy. And I'm there 3 or 4 days a week, and I'm very accessible.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode and would like to learn more about entrepreneurship, we would love it if you hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of InFactor.